They're researching you again, but this time without microscopes, therapists, private investigators, or bogus pals in your DMS. This time, they sent the experts, the ones who don't blink when bombs go off. They are taught to stay unnervingly quiet as the world around them burns. When those tough soldiers examined how you reacted to betrayal, they discovered nothing. Absolutely nothing. The absence worried them more than any weapon could. When they destroyed your life, tugged every thread to see you crumble, and planned your demise with surgical precision, they anticipated uproar, yelling, vengeance plans, and the same instability with which they had characterized you, as well as your reaction. To fit the stereotype they had spent so much time constructing. Instead, you did something that completely broke their understanding of human nature. You responded with quiet, not the silence of submission or horror, but the stillness of someone who has already assessed every result and determined their games were not worth a single quick impulse. That remains undisturbed. Analysts are rewiring their training manuals due to the need for quiet. The military even examines video evidence of how you acted, how you refused to flinch when they damaged your reputation, how you maintained your composure when they turned people against you, and how you maintained an almost supernatural calm as your life was slowly crushed. They attempted to duplicate it in order to capture the lack of response that caused your adversaries to doubt their own existence. They don't realize, and will never grasp, that this was not made in a classroom. You did not practice this under controlled settings, with safety personnel on standby. You formed it on the battlefield in real time, where every treachery was live ammo, every sabotage was an actual explosion, and every attack on your character was a true effort to kill your soul. These weren't drills. These were significant moments. You created something from the flames. No military academy can teach how to become completely unreachable. That unreachability is not developed by dogma or practice. It is the result of enduring real peril without losing oneself. It is the silent strength of someone who refuses to feed the tale their adversaries wish to tell. As a result, they experience the most bewilderment and terror. When someone assaults you, they are not just attempting to injure you, but also to exert control over you. They want a response because your reaction equals their win. Your tears become trophies. Your fury, their validation. Your breakdown, their masterpiece. But you, that unusual and uncomfortable abnormality, had nothing to give them. There is no flinching, trembling, or even a hitch in your breathing. You created a space in which their attacks died. When they don't respond, they cease viewing you as a person and start dealing with something much worse than emotional manipulation. The special operations instructors even devised a phrase for the tactic: non-existence. It defines a condition of full non-reactivity in which you cease to exist as a potential target. Enemies cannot strike. Will not reply. They cannot shatter anything that refuses to accept the concept of breaking. They can't win against something that won't admit defeat. You did not just disregard their punches. You made them irrelevant, turning sabotage into background noise. Evolution was a betrayal into white, static, well-organized ruin that you scarcely noticed while your attention was diverted to something much larger than what you were focused on. While they celebrated what they saw as your demise, you were silently building the new version of your self-foundations. They were unable to recognize development. They couldn't interrupt. Their victory laps appeared trivial in comparison to the architecture you were creating. You disregarded them not out of weakness, but because you were too busy becoming invincible to play their petty games. The case study is now being exhibited in top schools, and every teacher pauses. Any regular person would have snapped at this point in the film. Twitch, tightened jaw, betraying stance. But you, nothing. Absolute zero. A mosquito doesn't bother a mountain. The water swallows a match. The cosmos is unaffected by a tantrum. How can you get that level of non-reaction? The veterans, the commanders who have seen everything, merely shake their heads. They know the truth. This is not a method to be learned. It is something you become. This is what occurs when pain is no longer painful. Not because it vanished, but because you sensed it. So frequently, it grew familiar. This is what occurs when betrayal loses its shock power, since you've previously considered every potential option. It happens when someone goes beyond the fundamental programming of human emotional responses and completely rewires the rules. You did not just acquire stronger skin. You created a new nervous system, one that no longer perceives sabotage as a threat because you've reclassified those blows as harsh education. One that no longer perceives betrayal as pure pain because you've recoded it into usable data, and one that no longer interprets attacks as invitations to crumble, but as clumsy, frantic attempts by inferior systems to survive rather than layering armor over vulnerability. You destroyed the fundamental structure that made being hurt possible. You become emotionally bulletproof by modifying the criteria themselves. Their analysts organized this into a 3-tier structure inside the zero-response procedure. Level 1 involves conscious repression or the deliberate withholding of an evident emotion. Level 2 is conditioned non-response, a learned reflex developed in controlled circumstances. However, Level 3, which you achieved without the use of manuals or simulators, is not the same. Non-reaction is the default. It is not a decision you make in the moment. It's a quality you possess. Stability does not need maintenance since it just exists. They spent months trying to reverse engineer that third level, but they failed because you constructed it under live fire, with every hit being genuine and every consequence permanent. What saddens them even more is what happened after the anticipated delayed collapse. A meltdown occurs when the mind fully processes the damage cracks that surface after the cacophony stops. They waited for the delayed reply, which never came. Instead of cracking, you passed through it. Rather of breaking down, you broke through. Others show scars, but you show development. Where most people develop triggers, you build immunity. Where wounds cause weakness, your wounds become weapons. They labeled it as the inverse trauma reaction in their confidential files, and it just demonstrated that their theories of human failure did not apply to you. Every act of sabotage against you did not diminish your authority. It doubled it. Every betrayal did not break your ability to trust. It destroyed the boundaries that had previously confined you. Every assault did not destroy a foundation since you had already made it unshakable, self-generating, and impossible to fall. Special operations psychologists are fixated on your neurological signatures. They compared brain scans of persons who were assaulted. Your pattern does not match any of the mapped fear circuits, monitored rage spikes, or plotted trauma indicators, despite others showing activity in protective regions. Your brain lights up in areas related to problem-solving, pattern identification, and strategic planning. When the current upheaval occurs, you're already 3 steps ahead, creating possibilities from wreckage they never anticipated. That is why elite units make your case a necessary study, not because you are traditionally violent, but because you represent a new kind of psychological warfare, non-participation as a tactic. The technique of extreme non-response is a sort of revenge. You do not hit back since doing so would justify the battle. You don't build walls because defending admits the potential of being conquered. Instead, your quiet or stillness becomes the most bewildering countermeasure. And here's what really bothers them. They pour energy into ruining you, and you refuse to accept it. That energy does not recover. It implodes. Their assaults collapse inward, dissipating the force they spent and disintegrating into nothing. Your presence turns their weapons into nothingness. And failure, the way their effort consumes itself, is the quietest and most terrible win of all. They end up destroying themselves with the identical weapons they used against you. Their poison has no host and travels back via their own system. Their fire has no fuel and eventually consumes the one who sparked it. The military calls this phenomena a psychological ricochet, but you call it justice, not the type you pursue or impose, but the natural kind that develops when someone assaults something that cannot be assaulted. When attempting to drown wood, breathe underwater, or burn what was forged in flames, there is no need to plan retribution. Your non-reaction becomes pure vengeance. Every second you stayed still compelled them to doubt their authority. Each day you remained cool, you weakened more of their power. Now they are seeing the long-term implications. The people who undermined you are unraveling, not because you retaliated, but because you refused to play their game. They're tormented by your silence. They compulsively check on you, looking for harm, but only finding development. They fabricate tales about your alleged secret anguish while seeing you prosper in public. They planned your collapse and continue to observe your rise or fall. This has nothing to do with them. That was the precise conclusion. Special Forces trainers attempt to reproduce the capacity to make foes unimportant by completely ignoring them. They want the ability to stop assaults simply by refusing to validate them. The ability to be so dedicated to your own progress that sabotage lacks the bandwidth to take hold. However, they keep hitting a roadblock because they are attempting to teach a skill. While what you represented was far deeper, you never learned to stop reacting. You progressed beyond being influenced. Instructors bring in specialists such as trauma psychologists, neuroscientists who map stress circuits, and even transcendental philosophers. They all depart, shaking their heads. This should not be conceivable based on their models. The human neurological system is hardwired to respond. Millions of years of evolution have prepared us for fight or flight. Nonetheless, you managed to override that software. They identified you as Subject Zero in their files, not because you were technically the first, but because you attained absolute zero reaction, also known as zero emotional deviation. There is no psychological damage, and the assault is not acknowledged. You've become the standard by which they compare everyone else, the baseline that their experts discuss in secret rooms. However, there is a contradiction. Every candidate they put up against you fails, and not because they are weak. They fail because they are still attempting to achieve zero by chiseling away bits, removing feeling, and denying their natural tendencies until they resemble statues rather than humans. They grit their teeth, clamp their jaws, and impose stillness via tension. However, you did not perform subtraction. You did not slash yourself. You did not suppress your emotions. You morphed into something completely different, something that just does not elicit the feelings they are attempting to suppress. And that transition disturbs people on a deeper level than science. If you had turned to ice, become numb and distant, they could have plotted, classed, and nodded in agreement. This suits their models. But you did not go numb. You became selectively alive. You're still laughing at beauty. You're still crying with love. You still gasp at sunsets and are affected by music. You have not lost your emotional palette. You've enlarged it. I refined it. What you rejected lacked emotion. It was squandered energy on the incorrect kind of emotion. You no longer react to assaults, betrayals, or manipulations because your nervous system recognizes them as background noise rather than dangers. You did not amputate your emotions. Rather, you adjusted them. It's as if you've developed a psychological immune system. Most individuals contract treachery like a virus. They develop a fever, collapse in agony, and take years to recover from the illness. But you've acquired immunity. What used to hurt now informs. What once triggered now educates. Every effort to undermine you is filtered, evaluated, and eliminated before reaching your core. You still feel the whole gamut of human emotions, including pleasure, passion, love, and sadness. But betrayal is no longer on the list. Betrayal has lost its passport to your body. That immunity is what makes you so perplexing to your audience. They can't be charted, can't be mimicked. You can't reverse engineer it. As a result, they create intricate exercises that attempt to imitate your replies. Special operations recruits go through simulated situations in where treachery is written, sabotage is conducted by colleagues, and reputations are ridiculed and assaulted under controlled settings. They want to know whether their men can reach the state you embody. However, every trial finishes in the same manner. The subjects continue to believe in the game. They react to victories and defeats with acclaim and humiliation, attacks and defense. They function under a structure that you long since abandoned. You didn't just play better. You understood the game was a cage and walked out of it. You saw victories and defeats, as well as attacks and defenses. All of this was an illusion created to trap people in response cycles. You ruined the match by refusing to accept the board. That's why the simulations fail. They're attempting to teach individuals how to remain calm in the midst of a storm. But you become the environment itself. You aren't just calm in the midst of turmoil. You are the serenity that makes turmoil unimportant. This is why your psychological profile has been kept secure in confidential vaults. Not because you are dangerous in the traditional sense, but because you symbolize a new kind of awareness. If the rest of the world understood what you represent, the whole power structure would quake. Imagine millions of people suddenly refusing to recognize manipulation. Imagine whole communities no longer supporting fear campaigns, no longer confirming lies, and no longer spending energy responding to orchestrated sabotage. The whole control system, which is based on expected answers, would come to a standstill. Fear necessitates a response. Manipulation demands acknowledgement. Without them, the system would starve. The irony is that they can't stop studying you. They are glued to the mystery. Because in their world, a world of psychological operations, international wars, and fabricated narratives, the ultimate weapon is neither a missile nor a firearm. It is what you have accomplished, the capacity to stay completely undisturbed. Not because you've trained longer or stronger or have been programmed with cutting-edge technology. This number is obtained by lived experience, namely through fire. They didn't believe you'd withstand treachery or that it would ruin you. What they created to shatter you were the circumstances that rewrote you. As a result, their efforts are consistently unsuccessful. You did not practice this in simulations. You built it in the unrepeatable furnace of your own tale, where repercussions were permanent. Every betrayal was a live round, and every defeat represented real blood and real cost. You did not learn how to control your responses. You developed beyond the need to respond at all. And since it was forged under real-world strain, your evolution cannot be bulk replicated. It cannot be bottled or taught in schools. It cannot be reduced to a list of strategies. This is the secret that keeps them up at night. You didn't get to zero by subtracting. You evolved into the kind of creature who no longer produces the expected replies. You did not become inaccessible by closing down. You were inaccessible after transcending. That means you're more than just an anomaly in their models. It demonstrates the possibility of a new kind of human consciousness, and a reminder that traditional power structures are already disintegrating. The reconnaissance teams who are currently monitoring you have a different direction than those who were first looking for weaknesses. They are not trying to find out how to break you. They have accepted that is impossible. Their purpose has evolved. They want to know how you broke the system designed to anticipate and exploit human reactions. They look at how you broke free from the fundamental mechanics of social interaction, how you got out of the bait and response cycle that most people are stuck in. They show hours of film showing you not in war or wrath, but just going about your daily lives while storms roar around you. Quiet breakfasts as the rumor mills churn out calm phone calls, while whole narratives are being built to undermine your controlled walks, while supporters are being transformed into accusers. They are taken aback by your acts, not by their substance. It is the accumulating quiet of what you refuse to provide. That absence is so complete. It reads as a presence, a gravitational stillness that rewrites the definition of influence in each space it fills. They attempted to formalize what they saw into theology. Inside closed networks, slides named tactical void operations, arrow, and instructions labeled non-acknowledgement protocols circulate. Trainings take place in large facilities, with role actors and simulated betrayals. Recruits are taught breathing patterns, programmed pauses, and micro-behavioral tactics that replicate your calm. However, every simulation generates the same failure. The trainees continue to assume the situation is genuine. They behave as if a response would justify an assault, as if quiet is only a delay before the true answer. What you represent is not a stop. It is a full change in orientation. You did not learn to turn off a reflex. You rewire the map such that the reflex does not exist in the first place. The distinction between imitation and becoming is analogous to that of a stage prop and a full ecosystem. They recruit the greatest neuroscientists to map circuits. Trauma psychologists analyze rupture patterns. Social engineers deconstruct influence algorithms, and cultural anthropologists examine narrative economies. The scans are confusing, with models predicting surges in panic or protective arousal. Your brain demonstrates activity and planning. Pattern detection and long-term planning take precedence over the present danger. You are reallocating energy into construction, laying the groundwork for futures people cannot envision burning down. The specialists write papers, have secret briefings, and debate policy consequences, but their graphics can only show correlations. No imaging will disclose the million-minute choices that determine your reactions. The unglamorous recurrence of saying no to validation and yes to self-authority until the default was reversed since your transformation was not a single event. They cannot pinpoint a single reason. They go over your history, seeking for the pivotal event, the betrayal that tilted the balance, the single controversy that did it. They fail. What transformed you was more of an accumulation than a surge. The slow arithmetic of micro-deaths and micro-rebirths. Each time you refused to feed someone's script, a tiny part of you perished as a result of the need for external acceptance. A new habit emerged over months and years as you turned your fury into strategy. These little forfeitures accumulated until the old reflex pathways were successfully excised. Their findings describe an evolving architecture with less response, more building, less validation, and a focus on internal control. It was formed out of need, not education. In evenings when the stakes were high and the consequences of failure were more serious than any training exercise could replicate. The consequences extend beyond human case studies to systemic danger. If your condition is not a one-time occurrence, but rather an invaluable way of human functioning, the whole control business based on eliciting reactions becomes fragile. Propaganda relies on a predictable receiver cycle. Logical processes rely on reflexive anger. Reputational warfare is dependent on those who will follow the script. You have rewired predictability out of your system, which weakens the leverage that others depend on. That is why their interest in you is both clinical and strategic. They see a future in which more individuals reject the hook, emotional manipulation fails on a large scale, and reactionary structures collapse. The concept scares systems designed for leverage. Still, they make notes and save information. You live. You maintain your rituals. You allow pleasure, love, and beauty to enter freely. You have not sacrificed humanity for stone. That is selective responsiveness. They cannot duplicate full-spectrum existence without debating reaction. They can map its borders, define its manifestations, and even do activities that mimic the external look of your quiet. However, nothing in their laboratories can replicate the gradual, essential alchemy you underwent, becoming what you need more than anything. It needed actual repercussions, irrevocable losses, and the daily commitment to choose your own internal logic over the narratives that others sought to impose. So they'll continue to watch. They will continue to attempt to reduce you to diagrams and training modules. Because in their universe, comprehension equals power. But seeing you live to build while others try to burn, to produce, while the old sabotage machines are rendered obsolete, is the most difficult lesson they confront. Certain evolutions cannot be taught. They must be occupied. The military wants to replicate you as field troops who cannot be broken, operators who cannot be fooled, assets that cannot be compromised. They devote resources to programs, drafting theories, and designing simulations. And yet, what they continue to produce are imitations, fake facsimiles of who you are from those laboratories and training grounds. They produce mission experts who are trained to repress, keep motionless, and resemble nothingness. However, imitation is not the same as embodiment. They create resistance when what the Earth really needs is transcendence, bracing itself against impact. Transcendence alters the plane on which impact may land. You are not only resistant to sabotage, you are immune to it. You are not only powerful in the face of an assault, you're invisible to it. You don't mount defenses against treachery because you live in a realm where betrayal is inconsequential, like debating over the color of gravity. That irrelevance was not a strategy you used. It's a state you achieved via a process of becoming. That's why all top-down interventions fail. They aim to reduce your presence to a checklist. Breathing exercises, mental frameworks, stoic scripts, and contingency drills. Then expect troops to achieve the same outcomes in the false safety of a complex. They forget that your quiet did not develop in a rehearsal room. It was created amid the unpredictable nature of existence under strain. Shaped by consequence and repetition, responses eventually cease to be the default. You have not learned to resist a response. You rewired your baseline, so the response is no longer there to be repressed. Training may teach you how to maintain silent. It cannot educate how to become the quiet that renders the provocation ineffective. Psychological warfare divisions have named the phenomena, but they cannot yet create an asymmetric response theory. According to their articles, deliberate non-engagement may be the most damaging response to a planned onslaught. The intentional exclusion of validation. They refuse to recognize the attack's premise in their models. Silence becomes a weapon because it denies the attacker input and hence meaning. However, their framing still views it as a technique, a cognitive decision made in the moment. They overlooked the difference that renders your impact disastrous for their playbooks. You do not consider zero reaction tactical. It's ontological. It is not something you wear like armor for a task and then take off. It represents the form of your inner world. Your zero response has more than just tactical consequences. They are cultural and neurological, and they projected fragmentation and a delayed collapse. They saw a reversal direction. Attackers are checking themselves. Allies are recalibrating whole networks, and everyone is starting to question their own assumptions. Psychologists in private briefings are increasingly writing about contemplation, the corrosive self-interrogation, and those who have put energy in your downfall. They see past abusers repeating their deeds at night, recognizing the futility of the cycles. They refueled. The force that was meant to destroy you goes inward, becoming a mirror that reflects their own smallness. They are far more concerned about the systemic implications. If your state can expand, if more people can resist the bait, disregard the staged indignation, and refuse to legitimize created scandals, whole sectors of influence will lose leverage, including propaganda, reputational assaults, and manufactured moral panics. All of these rely on predictable receivers to feed the machine. You rewired predictability out of your system, introducing a new vulnerability in the control architecture. That is why think tanks and attached research groups are fixated on your file, not as an experiment, but as a strategic danger. However, their data and scenario modeling cannot replicate the intimate alchemy that rendered you indigestible. Biology will reveal correlations between diverse brain activations, changed stress signs, and shifted focus from limbic response to prefrontal construction. However, nothing in a scan can replicate the gradual moral decisions, ritual refusals of validation, and minor daily deaths to the need for external adulation that have cumulatively transformed your operating system.
Hey, Sam here, the lead designer on Adobe Podcast, and I'm out here in front of some construction by the Adobe New York City Union Square office, and just recording this video to give you a little sample to try out enhanced speech. So try turning it on, turning it off, and adjusting the strength slider to see how it does at canceling out the background noise and enhancing my voice. So there's even more background noise now. You can hear this large generator turning on behind me. So hope you enjoy enhanced speech, and thanks for trying it out. See ya. One more example before I go. This is an elevator lobby, also here at the Adobe office. Very echoey, and enhanced speech does a great job in environments like this too.